My name is Nora. I am 60 years old. What I am about to share will change the way you think about your own family. Just 3 days ago, my own son Lucas and his wife Paige pushed my husband Thomas and me off a 90-foot cliff. As I lay shattered and bleeding on the cold ground, I heard Thomas whisper with fading strength, "Nora, stay still. Pretend you are gone." But that was not the most painful part. The real pain came when he told me the cruelest truth a mother could ever hear, a secret our children had hidden for 25 years. For 40 years, Thomas and I believed we had built the perfect family. Each morning in our cozy home in Cedar Ridge, the scent of coffee mixed with birdsong outside the window. I worked as a teacher at Maple Ridge Elementary, coming home each afternoon with stories from my students. Thomas ran his little workshop, Whitman Woodcraft, shaping wood into furniture so beautiful it looked alive. His rough but gentle hands could turn plain timber into something worthy of love. We had 2 sons, Andrew, our firstborn, and Lucas, who came 5 years later. Andrew was the light in the house, always laughing, always helping his father, always protecting me from worry. Lucas was quieter, more withdrawn, yet I loved him with every part of my heart. A mother never plays favorites, or at least, that is what I once believed. On Sundays, after service at St. Bartholomew Chapel, we would gather around our walnut table that Thomas had carved himself. Andrew would talk excitedly about studying engineering while Lucas poked at his food, lost in thought. Life was simple, beautiful. In the evenings, Thomas and I would walk the trails around town, dreaming aloud about the years ahead, about watching grandchildren grow and growing old together in that same house. I never knew those peaceful walks were preparing us for the one that would almost end our lives. On weekends, I hosted family gatherings where my sisters, Ruth and Elaine, came with their husbands and children. The house filled with laughter, children running wild, women trading recipes, men fixing something in the yard. Thomas was my partner in everything. After 40 years of marriage, he still brought home wildflowers he picked along the road. He helped me grade my students' papers, and I held the wood steady for him in the shop. We were a team strong, steady, inseparable, or so I believed. At night, we sat on the porch counting stars, planning a small home by the ocean once we retired. We dreamed of seeing the sea for the first time, of a simpler life, once the boys had their own families. But perfect happiness, I later learned, often hides the deepest tragedy. When Andrew turned 20, something inside our home began to shift. He started arguing with Lucas about things I could not understand. Sometimes I caught them whispering in the hallway, falling silent as soon as I appeared. Thomas said it was just brothers being brothers and that it would pass. I wanted to believe him because I needed to believe our family was still whole. One October night, exactly 25 years ago, Andrew never came home for dinner. We waited through the hours 11, 12, 1 in the morning. Lucas stayed in his room, pretending to study, but his eyes looked strange whenever I asked about his brother. Thomas went out with the neighbors to search. They combed every corner of Cedar Ridge, every trail, every place Andrew loved. At dawn, they found his body at the bottom of Hollow Rock Gorge. The police called it an accident, saying he must have slipped in the dark. I accepted that story because I could not bear to imagine anything worse. Andrew's funeral was the darkest day of my life. I wore my only black dress, the same one from my mother's funeral. Lucas was eerily calm for someone who had just lost his brother. While I cried until my body trembled, he stood silent with a look that, even now, fills me with dread. Thomas never left my side that day, holding me when my legs gave out, whispering words meant to comfort me, words that I now know carried a bitter taste. After Andrew's death, Lucas changed completely. He became more attentive, more loving, as if he was trying to atone for something. He helped me with the chores, followed his father to the shop, and brought me little gifts whenever he saw sadness on my face. I thought his kindness was a sign of grief, an effort to fill the empty space Andrew had left behind. How naive I was. What he was truly doing was perfecting a mask to hide the monster that lived beneath. The years moved on, and though time dulled the pain, it never vanished. Lucas married Paige, a charming girl from a nearby town, and for a while they seemed happy. They had 2 beautiful children, and for the first time in decades, I believed life was giving us another chance at peace. Paige called me Mom and helped around the house during visits. Lucas had inherited Thomas's gift for carpentry and opened his own small business. Everything appeared serene again. But now, lying broken at the bottom of this gorge, with blood in my mouth and my ribs cracked, I see the truth. That peace was only a well-built illusion. The first signs of trouble began 6 months ago, when Thomas and I decided to revise our estate plan. We had spent a lifetime saving, and between the house, the land from my parents, and our accounts, there was nearly $200,000 to pass on to our family. It was Lucas who suggested we see the lawyer. "Mom, Dad, you are 60 now," he said with that smile I now see for what it was. Paige sat beside him, gently touching my hand with the same fingers that would later push me to my death. "We love you so much," she said softly. "We just want to make sure you are protected." I mistook her sweetness for love, not manipulation. The attorney, an older man named Lawrence, whom we had trusted for years, explained our options: trust, division, or a standard will. Lucas urged us to name him and Paige as sole heirs, promising they would share it fairly later. He said it was logical that as we aged, they would need access to our resources to care for us properly. Something about his tone made me uneasy, but Thomas, ever the trusting soul, agreed without hesitation. My heart whispered doubts, especially as I remembered how Andrew once dreamed of supporting us when we grew old. But Andrew was gone, and Lucas was the only son left. We signed the papers that Tuesday afternoon. Paige wore a green dress and hugged me tightly afterward. "Now we are one family forever," she murmured in my ear. Her words gave me chills, though I did not know why. Lucas shook his father's hand with a smile that did not touch his eyes. That evening, as I cooked dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had made a grave mistake. In the following weeks, their visits became more frequent, but the warmth was gone. They no longer came just to talk or share a meal. Each time they brought advice how to fix the house, which policies to buy, which investments to choose. One afternoon, Paige ran her eyes across our furniture with quiet calculation. "Mom, maybe you should sell this big house and move somewhere smaller," she said. "We can help you find a place in town." But I loved that home. Every corner held a story. Every wall echoed with laughter. The kitchen where I had cooked for 40 years. The workshop where Thomas created his art. The yard where our children once played. I could not imagine life anywhere else. When I refused, I saw a flash of irritation in Lucas's eyes that chilled me to my core. The workshop where Thomas shaped his finest creations. The yard where our sons and grandchildren once played. I could not imagine life anywhere else. When I told them that, I saw a flicker of irritation in Lucas's eyes that froze my blood. "Mom, you are being unreasonable," he said in a tone I had never heard from him before. "This house is too large for 2 people your age. If something happens, we might not get here in time." Paige nodded quickly, adding that the upkeep must cost a fortune. She said it would be wiser to sell now while the market was strong and move somewhere easier to manage. Thomas started to listen, nodding as he considered their reasoning. He was always the practical one, but I could not silence the feeling that something darker hid beneath all that concern. One night, after another tense visit, I asked Thomas if he found it strange how suddenly Lucas had become interested in our finances. "Nora," he said, rinsing his toothbrush, "he just cares about us. Maybe we should think about it. We are not young anymore." But there was a shadow behind his eyes, a doubt he would not voice. Now I realized Thomas had already begun to suspect what I could not yet see. Things escalated when Lucas suggested we grant him power of attorney over our accounts. "It is only precaution," he said calmly, while Paige brewed tea in our kitchen as if it were hers. "If either of you ever gets sick, we can handle everything easily." His tone was so natural, so logical, that for a moment he nearly convinced me. Still, something in his insistence kept me uneasy. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to Thomas breathe beside me, wondering why my heart felt so restless. The next morning I called my sister Ruth. Ruth had always been sharper than I was, quick to question people's motives. When I told her about Lucas's persistence, she was silent for a while. "Nora," she finally said, "doesn't it seem odd that Lucas wants control of your money so badly? He has his own business. He is doing fine. Why would he need that kind of access?" Her words struck me like a jolt of cold air. She was right. Lucas had never needed help before. That afternoon, when Lucas came again to talk about our future, I decided to face him directly. "Son," I said as we sat in the living room, Why is it so important that you manage our finances? Your father and I are still capable." His face tightened instantly. For a heartbeat, I saw something in his eyes, cold, sharp, dangerous. "Mom, it is not about control," he said stiffly. "It is about love and family duty." But the way he spoke those words sounded more like a warning than affection. Paige, who had stayed silent until then, finally spoke with her soft but steady voice. "Nora, we just want what is best for you," she said. "It hurts to watch you stress over things we could handle for you." That night, after they left, Thomas and I had our first real argument in years. He thought I was being paranoid, imagining problems that did not exist, but I felt it in my bones that something was wrong, that our son was not the same person anymore. "Thomas," I said as we washed the dishes, "do you remember how Lucas was before Andrew died? He was different then, more distant, colder somehow. I cannot explain it, but there was something in him that frightened me." Thomas stopped mid-motion, the plate still dripping in his hands, and looked at me. In his eyes I saw something I had never seen before: recognition. "Nora," he said quietly, "there are things about Andrew's death I never told you." My heart began to pound so hard I could hear it in my ears. His words cut through me like lightning. "What do you mean about Andrew's death?" I asked, my voice trembling. Thomas sat down heavily at the kitchen table, the same table where we had shared thousands of meals, where Andrew once did his homework, and where Lucas always sat in silence. He rubbed his face with both hands as if trying to wipe away years of guilt. "The night Andrew died," he began, his voice breaking, "Lucas was not in his room studying like he told us. I saw him leave the house around 8. Something about his behavior that week had made me uneasy." He paused, staring at his hands as though the truth he carried was written there. "I followed him," he continued, "and found them near Hollow Rock Gorge. They were yelling, shouting terrible things at each other. My world started spinning. What were they fighting about?" I whispered, even though part of me did not want to know. Thomas lifted his gaze, tears pooling in his eyes, tears I had never seen, not even at our eldest son's funeral. "It was about the inheritance, Nora. Lucas was furious because Andrew, being the oldest, would receive most of what we owned. But there was more. Andrew had found something about money." "What money?" I asked, as my knees weakened beneath me. Thomas sighed deeply. 3 days before he died, Andrew came to the workshop to talk. He had discovered that Lucas had been taking money from our savings account, small amounts at first, then larger ones. Andrew had proof. He had been tracking it for months. My mind refused to grasp what I was hearing. My youngest son, the one who comforted me after Andrew's death, who cared for us so gently, had been stealing from us even before his brother died. "Why did you never tell me?" I asked, my voice breaking with betrayal. "Because when I reached the gorge, it was already too late," he said hoarsely. I saw Lucas standing beside Andrew's body, trembling, crying, saying over and over, "It was an accident, it was an accident." He looked at me with those pleading eyes and begged for help. "Dad," he said, "Andrew tripped while trying to hit me." I only defended myself, and he fell. Tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. "But you believed him," I whispered, though I already knew. Thomas nodded slowly, the guilt etched deep into his face. He was my son, Nora. My youngest son was begging for help, and Andrew was already gone. I could not bring one back by destroying the other. I truly believed it was an accident, that Lucas had learned his lesson and would become a better man afterward. "And the money?" I asked, desperate to know the full truth. Lucas promised to repay it slowly, saying he had used it for a business that failed. He swore it would never happen again. And I believed him, Nora. God forgive me, but I believed him because I needed to believe my son was not a murderer. I rose from the table, my legs weak, holding onto the wall so I would not collapse. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about my surviving son, about the last 25 years, shattered like glass. "Did he ever pay the money back?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Never," Thomas said. "He kept stealing, little by little, and I pretended not to see. To confront him would have meant admitting I had hidden a crime. I became his accomplice, Nora. Each time I stayed quiet, each time I ignored the missing money, I sank deeper into guilt. The horrifying truth finally took shape in my mind. That is why he wants control of our finances now," I whispered. "It is not out of love. He wants to finish what he began 25 years ago. Thomas nodded heavily. And there is something else, Nora, something I discovered recently. What more could there be? I asked, my heart barely holding together. Thomas went to his desk and took out some papers he had kept hidden. I have been quietly checking Lucas's finances, he said. His woodworking business is collapsing. He owes more than $100,000 to banks and suppliers. The numbers blurred before my eyes as I read them. Lucas was not the successful craftsman he claimed to be. He was a desperate man living on deception and stolen money. Does Paige know? I asked, remembering her soft voice and careful hugs. I am sure she does, Thomas said. I have seen how she steers the conversation toward our savings, the house, our insurance policies. Those questions are not innocent, Nora. They are the calculations of someone measuring the price of our deaths. His words froze my blood. Our deaths, I whispered. Until that moment, I thought Lucas only meant to steal from us. But if he had once killed his own brother over money, what would stop him from doing the same to us? Thomas, I said, clutching his hands, we have to go to the police. We must tell them everything about Andrew and what is happening now. Thomas shook his head, his face full of despair. With what proof, Nora? I helped hide a murder. If I speak now, I go to prison too. And who will believe a 65-year-old man who has carried this secret for 25 years? He was right. So what do we do? I asked, my voice breaking. Do we wait for him to finish what he started? We will be careful, Thomas said, trying to sound braver than he felt. We will find a way to protect ourselves. We are going to find a way to protect ourselves, to gather proof, Thomas said. But his words were cut short by the ringing of the phone. It was Lucas. Hi, Mom, he said, in that soft voice that now sounded sinister to me. Paige and I were thinking, and we wanted to do something special for your 40th wedding anniversary. How about a trip to the mountains you always talk about? A weekend hike, some pictures, a beautiful family day. My blood froze. I looked at Thomas, who had heard every word, and his face mirrored my terror. That is a very thoughtful idea, son, I said with a trembling voice. But let us think about it and call you back tomorrow. When I hung up, Thomas and I sat in silence, realizing we had just received an invitation to our own execution. The mountains, I whispered. He is going to take us there to kill us and make it look like an accident. Thomas nodded grimly, just as he had 25 years ago at the gorge. That night we did not sleep. We held each other in the dark, whispering desperate plans to survive our own son. The next few days were a nightmare of pretending. We had to smile when Lucas and Paige visited, nod along as they spoke excitedly about the trip, act like we were looking forward to it. Every word they said felt like poison. Inside, every part of me screamed in fear. I was staring into the eyes of my eldest son's killers, and they were now plotting our deaths. Paige came by on Wednesday afternoon with a shopping bag and that radiant smile that now looked more like a mask from hell. Nora, dear, she said, wrapping her arms around me, the same arms that would soon push me into the abyss. I picked up supplies for our mountain adventure. Cookies, fruit, water, all we will need for the picnic. She showed me everything like an eager child, but I could only see how each item could hide a crime. I also brought my new camera, she added, taking out a sleek mirrorless one. I want to capture every moment of this special day. They will be memories we cherish forever. The irony made me sick. The only photo she planned to take was of our broken bodies at the bottom of some cliff. Lucas appeared behind her, holding a brand new hiking backpack. Dad, he said cheerfully to Thomas, I bought everything we need for a safe hike. Ropes, harnesses, lanterns, even a first aid kit. Every word was a cruel joke. Safety gear for the murders they had planned. The thought made me dizzy. Is it not a little risky for people our age? I asked, trying to sound casual, searching for an excuse to cancel. Paige touched my cheek gently, her false tenderness twisting my stomach. That is why we picked an easy trail, she said sweetly. It is safe enough for children, and of course Lucas and I will be there to take care of you both. Yes, I thought, they would take care of us until the moment they decided to end our lives. That night, after they finally left, Thomas and I sat trembling in the living room, not just from the chill but from the terror we had kept bottled inside for hours. We cannot go, I said, clutching his hands. We will think of an excuse. If we refuse, he said in a low voice, they will find another way to kill us. Maybe something that looks even more accidental, a fire, a robbery gone wrong. At least in the mountains, we will know what to expect. His words made sense, but they gave me no comfort. So what do you suggest? I asked, desperate for any plan that might keep us alive. Thomas stayed silent for a long moment, his brow furrowed. We will go, but we will be ready. I will hide my phone and set it to record everything that happens. If we survive, we will have proof. And if we do not, he said, his voice breaking, someone will know the truth. That Friday night, we barely touched our food. Each bite felt heavy, as if it were our last meal together in that kitchen full of memories. Thomas reread his will one last time, making sure Lucas would not easily inherit everything without suspicion. I wrote a letter, he said softly, pulling a sealed envelope from his desk. It is addressed to your sister Ruth. I explained everything about Andrew's death and what we think Lucas plans for us. I hid it among our important papers. If we do not come back, at least she will know where to find the truth. That night, we held each other tightly, whispering words of love that might be our last. If something happens to me, Thomas said, I want you to know that these 40 years with you have been the best of my life. Despite the mistakes and the secrets, I love you more than my own life. I cried quietly, memorizing the rhythm of his breathing, the warmth of his skin, the scent that had always felt like home. Saturday dawned clear and cruelly beautiful, the sunlight mocking our fear. Lucas arrived early, whistling a cheerful tune that chilled my blood. Morning, lovebirds, he called from the door. Ready for your adventure? Paige stood beside him, glowing like a bride on her wedding day, only this was a wedding with death. During breakfast, which we could hardly swallow, Lucas laid out the route. It is a beautiful trail, he said, spreading a map on the table. It leads to a viewpoint overlooking the entire valley. His eyes sparkled with a sinister joy. Of course, the view would be breathtaking, I thought. It would be the last one we ever saw. The trail has some steep parts, Paige added with a bright smile, but nothing you two cannot handle. Her words sounded like a cruel joke. We were 60 years old, barely able to manage a walk in the park. As we packed the car, I watched Lucas check his backpack carefully. Inside, I glimpsed ropes, a small shovel, and what looked like a flare gun. What is that for? I asked, trying to sound calm. For safety, he answered smoothly. If we get lost or something goes wrong, we can send a signal. Of course, they would send a signal after pushing us over the edge so our bodies could be found. Everything had been planned, every detail calculated to make our deaths look like a tragic accident on a family trip. Every detail had been arranged to make our deaths look completely natural. The 2-hour drive to the mountains felt endless. Paige played cheerful songs and sang along as if it were a happy family trip. Lucas drove cautiously, following every rule, stopping at each sign. He did not want a real accident to ruin his perfect plan. During the ride, Thomas quietly took my hand and turned on the recorder hidden in his phone. From that moment on, every word, every breath would be captured. If we made it out alive, there would be proof. If not, at least the truth would survive. When we reached the trailhead, my heart pounded so hard it hurt. The place was breathtaking, towering trees, the sound of a nearby river, but to me, it was the stage for our execution. Lucas and Paige pulled their backpacks from the car, laughing and smiling as if it were the happiest day of their lives. Ready for the adventure? Lucas asked. And for the first time in 25 years, I saw that same cold gleam in his eyes that he had the night his brother died. The path began gently, winding through ferns and mossy rocks. Paige walked ahead, snapping photos, marveling at the wildflowers and birds. Her performance was flawless, the perfect daughter-in-law enjoying a special outing. Lucas stayed behind us, supposedly to make sure we did not fall behind, but I could feel his eyes fixed on our backs. Each time I turned, he smiled with that practiced grin built from 25 years of deceit. "How are you doing, Mom and Dad?" he asked in that false tone of care. "Need a rest?" After an hour of climbing, the trail steepened. My legs ached, and Thomas was struggling to breathe. We were not used to such strain, and they knew it. They had chosen a route that would exhaust us before they acted. "We are almost at the lookout," Paige called cheerfully. But I remembered the map. We still had nearly an hour left to reach the real viewpoint. Her lie confirmed my fear the place they intended to kill us was much closer. As we climbed, I forced myself to memorize every turn, every distinctive rock, every tree that could serve as evidence if I lived to tell the police. Thomas was doing the same. Our eyes met more than once, filled with dread yet silent resolve. We both knew we were walking toward our deaths, but it was our only chance to expose the truth. "Oh, look at that," Paige suddenly exclaimed, pointing to a large rock formation to the right. "That cliff has an amazing view. Let us go up there and take some pictures." My blood turned to ice. There it was, the place they had chosen for our deaths. The cliff rose nearly 90 feet above the trail, reached by a narrow side path littered with loose stones and almost no trees to cling to if one slipped. From the top, a steep drop opened into a deep gorge lined with sharp rocks. "I do not think that is a good idea," I said, trying to sound calm. "That path looks dangerous for people our age." But Lucas was already heading toward the turnoff, his backpack filled with safety gear he would never use to save us. "Come on, Mom," he said in that persuasive tone he used as a child when he wanted his way. "It will only take a few minutes. Paige is right, the photos will be spectacular." The way he said spectacular made me shiver. They would be spectacular indeed for anyone seeing them later as evidence of our accident. Thomas gave my hand a firm squeeze, a silent reminder that his phone was recording. We had to keep going. We needed the proof. If we refused now, they would simply find another place, another time, another way to kill us. The climb toward the cliff was grueling. The loose rocks slid beneath our shoes, and more than once I nearly fell. But what terrified me most was how perfect this place was for a murder. One slip would mean certain death, and no one would ever see it happen. Almost there, Paige called from above, moving with the ease of someone who had planned every step. Lucas followed, then turned to help us up the final stretch. His grip on my arms felt like the talons of a vulture. The view from the top was stunning. From there, you could see the valley, the faraway mountains, and the silver river below. In any other moment, it would have been breathtaking. Now it felt like standing at the edge of a nightmare. "Come over here for pictures," Paige called, positioning herself near the edge. "I want the valley in the background." Thomas and I moved forward slowly, each step pulling us closer to the end. I saw Lucas moving behind us, gauging distance, measuring angles. "Perfect," Paige said, lifting her camera. "Now, hold each other and smile." Thomas and I embraced, maybe for the last time, as she snapped photo after photo. Each flash felt like lightning warning of an approaching storm. "Take one more," Lucas said, stepping closer. "But move back a little so the scenery looks better." One step back would put us right on the edge. Thomas and I exchanged a knowing look. The moment had arrived. We stepped back as told, feeling the ground slip away, nothing but empty air behind us. Paige lifted her camera again, but this time her eyes had changed. There was no need to pretend anymore. The mask had fallen. "Smile," she said in a cold, hollow voice. "This will be your last picture." At that instant, Lucas lunged forward, arms outstretched to push us. The plan was simple: make it look like a fall, take photos, report an accident. But Thomas was ready. In one swift motion, he grabbed Lucas by the wrist and yanked him forward. "If we are going to die, you are coming with us," he roared, a fury in his voice I had never heard before. For a brief, frozen second, the four of us balanced on the edge of the cliff, locked together in a terrible dance between life and death. Paige screamed and tried to pull Lucas back, but the weight of all four of us was too much. I felt the ground crumble beneath my feet, felt gravity take hold. Then we fell together, tangled in a deadly embrace, our screams swallowed by the wind as the jagged rocks rushed up to meet us. In those endless seconds, I thought of Andrew, how he must have felt when Lucas sent him into the gorge 25 years ago. The impact was brutal, a sickening crack of bones, the sound of my own body breaking. The pain was beyond words. Blood filled my mouth, and the copper taste told me what my mind refused to accept. This time, Lucas had won. There would be no witnesses, no one to tell the truth. But then I heard Thomas's voice, faint yet firm. "Nora, stay still, play dead," and I realized with shock that I was still alive. The pain was unbearable, searing through every inch of me, but I obeyed his voice as if it came from heaven itself. Blood ran down my face, and my clothes clung to me, soaked and sticky. Still, I forced myself to remain motionless, even controlling my breathing until it was invisible. A few feet away, I could hear the groans of Lucas and Paige. They had survived too, but their pain sounded far worse. Paige whimpered that her leg was broken, her voice trembling with pain. Lucas's voice came next, weak but anxious, asking if she was all right. His concern for her twisted my stomach. How could a man who murdered his brother and tried to kill his parents still be capable of tenderness? Paige moaned again. "It hurts so much, Lucas. And what about the old folks?" Her words stung worse than the wounds. We had never been family to her, just obstacles in the way of her greed. I heard movement, the sound of Lucas dragging himself toward us. My heart pounded so hard I was sure he would hear it. "They are dead," he finally said after what felt like hours. Both of them, eyes open, not breathing. His lie filled me with a fragile spark of hope. If he believed we were dead, maybe we had a chance. "Perfect," Paige whispered, her tone dripping with cold satisfaction. "It worked just like we planned except for the part where we fell too." She let out a bitter laugh. "At least we no longer have to pretend we love them." Their voices faded slowly as they crawled away, planning their next lie. I listened, holding my breath, as Lucas repeated the story they would tell that Thomas slipped, tried to grab me, and dragged them both down. Paige added her lines, rehearsed to perfection, painting them as the devastated survivors of a tragic family accident. If I had not lived it, I might have believed her. When their voices finally disappeared, silence fell over the gorge. Then I heard Thomas whisper my name, so soft it was almost part of the wind. "Nora, are you alive?" he breathed. "Yes," I whispered back, barely able to form words. "I am hurt but alive. My leg is broken," he said, his voice tight with pain, "and I think a few ribs too." "What about you?" I asked, forcing myself to take stock of my body. A sharp pain shot through my right arm, my head throbbed like a drum, and my shoulder felt wrong, twisted somehow. But I was alive, and that was more than I had dared to hope for. "We are hurt, but alive," I whispered. "It works, but there is no signal down here." That was the most terrifying part. We were breathing, yes, but trapped at the bottom of a gorge, injured, cut off from the world. If no one came looking, we would die slowly of hunger, of thirst, of our wounds. "Thomas," I said softly, "before it is too late, tell me everything. The truth about what really happened to Andrew." He exhaled deeply, as if he had been waiting a quarter of a century to speak those words. That night he began, his voice trembling. "Andrew came to me in the workshop. He was furious, holding papers, bank statements. He had proof that Lucas had been taking money from our accounts for months. Small sums at first, then larger ones. Andrew had noticed the gaps and started investigating. The pain in my body merged with the ache in my heart as I listened. Andrew wanted to confront Lucas that very night," Thomas continued. "I begged him to wait until morning, but he refused. He said he could not sleep knowing his brother was stealing from us." "And you followed him?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Yes, I followed, afraid of what might happen. I knew how hot-tempered Andrew could be, and there was something dark in Lucas lately, a coldness that scared me. When I reached the gorge, I saw them screaming at each other. Andrew was waving the papers in Lucas's face, shouting, 'You are a thief. You are stealing from our parents.' Lucas denied everything, calling him crazy, saying he was making it up. My heart pounded as I imagined it, my two sons, arguing in the dark, betrayal between them. Andrew told him that if he did not confess and return the money, he would tell us himself. That is when Lucas snapped," Thomas said, his voice breaking. "He yelled that Andrew had always been the favorite, that he always got everything. Then he pushed him hard, deliberate. I saw Andrew stumble, trying to catch himself, his arms flailing in the air, reaching for something to hold on to. But it was too late. Tears streamed down my face, mixing with the dirt and blood. "Why did you never tell me?" I whispered. Thomas's voice cracked with guilt, because when I reached him, Lucas was crying, shaking, repeating that it was an accident. "He begged me not to tell you, said he could not bear to lose you too. But you knew he was lying," I said, my heart breaking. "Yes, but he was my son, Nora, my only son left. How could I hand him to the police? How could I destroy what little was left of our family?" His words cut deeper than any wound. "And the money," I pressed. Lucas promised he would pay it back, little by little. He swore it had been a foolish mistake, born of desperation, and promised it would never happen again. But he never returned a single dollar. Instead, he kept stealing, and I kept silent. Every passing day turned me deeper into his accomplice. Just then, faint voices reached us from above. Lucas and Paige had found help. Soon, rescuers would arrive, and our murderous children would become the grieving survivors of a terrible family tragedy. The voices drew closer, followed by the distant hum of helicopters circling overhead. The rescue teams were near, and with them came the most critical moment of our lives. Thomas and I had to decide within minutes, should we keep pretending to be dead until the right time came to expose the truth, or risk being found alive beside our killers. "Nora," Thomas whispered urgently. The phone recorded everything. Paige's confession, Lucas admitting we were obstacles. It is all there. But if they find us alive now, they could destroy it before we ever reach the police. He was right. If they realized we had survived and heard them plotting, they would silence us for good. This time, it would not look like an accident. It would be deliberate, final. We had to wait for the right moment. "They are down here," Lucas shouted, his voice breaking with perfect grief. "Please, hurry." His performance was flawless. If I had not known better, I might have believed him. "Sir, stay calm," an authoritative voice responded. It must have been the rescue leader. "We are coming down to reach you." I heard the metallic clatter of carabiners and ropes, the sound of boots scraping the rock face. Paige played her part perfectly, her voice trembling as she cried, "I cannot believe this happened." We were taking pictures, laughing, and suddenly they slipped. Each word cut through me like glass because I knew she would repeat that same lie to everyone who asked. The rescuers descended, their voices growing louder. Thomas squeezed my hand faintly, reminding me to keep still. "They are here," one of them shouted, 2 people down at the bottom. A man approached, checking for signs of life. I kept my eyes closed, barely breathing. His fingers searched for a pulse along my neck, his ear hovering near my mouth. "This one still has a weak pulse," he said about Thomas. "The woman, I am not sure. Get the medical team down here, now." My heart pounded. The plan was working. They believed Thomas was barely alive and that I was near death, no threat to anyone. For the next few minutes that stretched like hours, the paramedics worked quickly. I felt the chill of an oxygen mask pressed over my face, heard the rustle of gauze and metal. They examined our wounds, stabilized us, and began strapping me onto a stretcher. The whole time, I had to fight every instinct in my body screaming for me to open my eyes, to ask for help, to stop pretending. "The man is stable, but critical," I heard one of the paramedics say over the radio. "The woman is in very serious condition, pulse nearly undetectable. We must transport immediately." Perfect. They would take us to the hospital, where we could finally reach the authorities before Lucas and Paige had the chance to silence us. As they lifted us toward the helicopter, I could hear Paige's faint sobs and the comforting words of the rescuers. "You were so brave to survive this," one of them told her. "It is a miracle you are both alive." If only they knew the true miracle that Thomas and I were still breathing, still able to tell the truth. Inside the helicopter, the sound of the rotor drowned out everything but the faint beeps of the medical monitors. Thomas lay beside me on another stretcher, motionless. The paramedics worked quickly to keep him stable. From their urgent whispers, I could tell his condition was worse than mine. A deep fear gripped me that he might die before we could expose our children. "Ma'am," a paramedic said gently, "if you can hear me, hold on. We will reach the hospital soon." His voice was warm, filled with compassion, a sound so foreign after all the deceit and cruelty I had heard from my own family. When we landed, chaos surrounded us. Doctors and nurses rushed through the hallways, shouting orders I could barely comprehend. They wheeled me into an emergency room and began working on my injuries. I had to keep pretending, eyes closed, limp, silent, but I also needed to find someone I could trust. "Doctor," a nurse said softly, "her vital signs are strange. Her pulse is stronger than expected for someone in this condition." My heart skipped a beat. They had noticed. My body was betraying me. "It happens sometimes in severe trauma," the doctor murmured. "The body clings to life in mysterious ways. Keep her under close observation. The next hours will be critical. We have done everything possible." I heard Paige nearby, pretending to cry, though to me it sounded like a sigh of relief. "Can we see them?" Lucas asked. Just for a few minutes. We need to say goodbye just in case. The doctor hesitated, then allowed it. Footsteps approached. I knew this was the most dangerous moment. I had to convince my son I was near death. Lucas's hand touched mine, and it took every ounce of strength not to recoil. "Mom," he whispered, "if you can hear me, I love you. I am so sorry." His words were like sugar laced with poison sweet, but meant to kill. Paige stepped closer, her voice soft. "Nora, dear, you have been like a mother to me. We will never forget you." Lies. They would remember me only because they would have to live with what they had done. Then Lucas leaned close to my ear, his breath cold against my skin. "I hope you learned your lesson, Mom. You should never have asked so many questions about the money. Some truths are better left buried, just like Andrew." My blood turned to ice. Our plan had worked. He had confessed again, right beside a nurse who heard everything. Lucas's whisper echoed inside me, like a death sentence turned into justice. He had mentioned Andrew. He had admitted that certain truths were buried. Most of all, he had confirmed that our curiosity about the finances had led to our so-called accident. But I needed more. I needed a confession that could never be twisted or denied again. The nurse who had overheard the whisper, a young woman named Inez, according to her badge, froze beside the monitor. Through my half-closed eyes, I saw her expression change. Shock, fear, then understanding. She had heard something she was never meant to hear, and her face revealed that she grasped the weight of those words completely. "What did you say about Andrew?" Paige asked, startled by the sudden mention of the dead brother. Lucas stiffened, realizing his mistake. "Nothing," he muttered quickly. "I just meant, well, Mom always wondered what really happened that night, but it does not matter anymore." Yet it did, and Paige, sharp as ever, sensed it. "Lucas," she said tightly, "let us go. The doctors need space." Their voices trembled with tension, both knowing too well they had said too much. When they left, Inez approached my bed quietly. "Ma'am," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I know you can hear me. What I just heard was not normal. If you are in danger, please find a way to tell me." Hope stirred inside me for the first time in days. Slowly, almost invisibly, I moved my index finger. It was the faintest motion, but Inez noticed. "Oh my God," she breathed. "She is pretending." I moved my finger again, twice. "Yes, listen," she whispered quickly, leaning close as she pretended to check my monitor. "If those people are dangerous, move your finger 3 times. Without hesitation, I did. Inez drew in a sharp breath. "They did this to you." 3 more movements confirmed it. She stepped back, pretending to adjust my IV, her face tightening as she struggled to decide what to do. At last, she leaned toward me again. "I will talk to the doctor in charge," she murmured. "But you must keep pretending until we can protect you. Do you understand?" I moved my finger once. The next minutes were endless. Inez left the room, and I waited, praying she would do the right thing and believe me. Then footsteps echoed outside. Inez returned, followed by an older man who looked like the head physician and 2 police officers. "Ma'am," the doctor said gently, "Nurse Inez has explained your situation. If you can hear me, you are safe now. The officers are here to protect you." Relief flooded through me so powerfully that I nearly broke character. "Can you open your eyes?" one of the officers asked. Slowly, I forced my eyelids open. The hospital light was blinding at first, but soon I could see their faces worried, kind, real. "Thank God," Inez whispered. "I thought I was losing my mind." "Ma'am," said the police officer, a serious middle-aged man, "my name is Detective Johnson. We understand you may be in grave danger. Can you tell us what really happened on that mountain?" My voice came out hoarse, trembling from hours of silence. "My son," I whispered. "My son and his wife pushed us." The next few hours blurred into chaos, statements, recordings, and truths finally breaking free after 25 years of lies. I told Detective Johnson everything I knew: Andrew's death, Lucas's theft, the pressure to rewrite our will, and finally their plan to kill us on the mountain. But the most important detail was the recording on Thomas's phone. "Your husband recorded evidence?" the detective asked, his tone sharpening with interest. "Yes," I whispered. "Everything is on that phone, the confessions, the plotting, all of it." Johnson immediately went to Thomas's room. My husband had regained consciousness an hour earlier, and when told the situation, he handed over the phone without hesitation. "Here is everything," he said weakly but with resolve. 2 years of lies, and the truth about today. While the technicians analyzed the file, Lucas and Paige waited calmly downstairs, still performing as grieving relatives. They had no idea their performance was about to end. "The recording is clear," the detective said an hour later. "We have direct admissions about Andrew's murder, evidence of embezzlement, and proof of premeditated attempted homicide. It is more than enough to arrest them." "Are you going to arrest them here?" I asked, suddenly afraid. "If they find out we are alive and speaking," Johnson nodded, understanding. "We already have officers positioned. As soon as the warrant is signed, they are done. Until then, you both remain under full protection." The irony of it all struck me. Lucas and Paige were probably still downstairs, accepting condolences, pretending to mourn us, planning our funeral and dividing what they thought would soon be theirs. They had no idea that upstairs, their world of lies was crumbling. "There is something else," the detective added, pulling out a folder. "After hearing your story, we examined your son's finances. He is not only bankrupt, as you suspected, but he owes a great deal to some dangerous individuals, loan sharks who do not forgive delays." My stomach turned cold. "You mean we were not just inconvenient to him?" I asked quietly. "Exactly," Johnson replied. "You were his only way out. With your estate, he could clear his debts and start over. Without it, he would likely be dead within weeks." That revelation deepened the wound. We were never just obstacles. We were his only chance at survival. Our deaths were not simply useful, they were necessary to save him. "And what about the children?" I asked, thinking of their innocent faces. "Social services will assume temporary custody," Johnson answered softly. "Once you recover, you may apply to raise them yourselves." The thought was overwhelming, raising the children of the 2 people who tried to kill us. Yet it was also a way to bring light out of darkness. They were innocent. They deserved a home built on love, not lies. "It is time," the detective said when an officer entered with signed documents. "The warrants are ready." Through the window overlooking the parking lot, I saw officers taking position quietly. The moment I had been waiting for 25 years had come. Lucas Black and Paige Black, the commanding officer's voice rang out firmly. "You are under arrest for the murder of Andrew Black and the attempted murder of Nora and Thomas Black." The silence that followed was absolute. Then Paige's voice broke through in hysterics. "What are you saying?" "We are the victims here. Our parents-in-law died in an accident." "Ma'am," the officer replied calmly, "your in-laws are alive, and they have provided full evidence of your crimes." There was another pause, then Lucas's desperate scream. "That is impossible. We saw them die. They were dead." His words were caught on the police recorder, sealing his fate. Through the radio, I heard Paige turn against him in panic. It was all his idea. I did not want to do any of this. He forced me, and Lucas shouted back, "You were the one who suggested the cliff. You planned everything." In minutes, their alliance disintegrated. Years of deception collapsed as they fought to save themselves. Detective Johnson returned to my room an hour later, his face reflecting both relief and sorrow. "They are in custody," he told me. "They are blaming each other, which only strengthens your case, but there is something else you need to know." "What now?" I asked, though my heart could hardly bear more. "During the arrest, we found this in your son's backpack," he said, holding up a small digital recorder. "Apparently, he had been recording conversations with you and your husband for weeks, likely trying to confirm if you suspected him." My blood turned cold. "What does that mean?" I whispered. The detective sighed. "It means he knew you were uncovering the truth. That mountain trip was not spontaneous. It was his response to your growing suspicion." In one of the recordings, you can clearly hear Paige say, "We need to act fast before they talk to the police." The precision and cruelty of it all took my breath away. They had not only planned our deaths, they had monitored us, studied us, calculated every move. We were nothing more than prey in their experiment. "There is more," Johnson continued. "During the financial review, we discovered forged documents, your signature copied on multiple forms granting access to your accounts. If you had died that day, your son would have immediately inherited everything. Each new fact cut deeper than the last. My own child had not only plotted my death but had stolen from me, forged my name, and destroyed the values I had spent a lifetime teaching. "How much money in total?" I asked, though dread already filled me. "About $50,000 over the past 5 years," he said quietly. "Small withdrawals, barely noticeable at first, but they added up. The money Thomas and I had saved through decades of hard work, every penny meant for our future, had funded our son's life of comfort while he planned our murder." The next days in the hospital blurred together endless police interviews, meetings with attorneys, and calls from journalists. The local news called it the most shocking family betrayal in decades. Reporters from across the country wanted our story, but none of them could capture the real tragedy, the death of trust itself. My sister Margaret arrived from the neighboring town, crying as she wrapped her arms around me as if we had been apart for a lifetime. "Nora," she kept repeating, "I always knew there was something off about Lucas after Andrew's death, but I never imagined he could do something like this." Her words brought me a strange kind of comfort. They reminded me that my instincts as a mother had not been entirely wrong. "And the children?" I asked, my voice trembling as I thought of my grandchildren now under social services care. "I saw them yesterday," Margaret said softly. "They are confused, asking when their parents are coming home. They are too young to understand any of this." Her words broke my heart all over again. Those little ones had lost everything without even knowing why. Our lawyer, the same Mr. Albert who had once helped us with our will, came to visit with an update on the case. "It is solid," he said with quiet confidence. "With the recordings, the confessions, and the financial documents, their chances of avoiding conviction are minimal." But then his tone changed. "However," he added, "they are trying to negotiate a plea for a lesser charge, claiming it was a crime of passion, not premeditation." "A crime of passion," I repeated, feeling my anger rise. "They plotted for weeks, bought gear, and selected the perfect place. How could that be impulsive?" Albert nodded. "I know, and the evidence of planning is strong. But their lawyers will argue that financial desperation clouded their judgment." Hearing that made my blood boil. They had murdered Andrew. They had nearly murdered us. They had stolen from us for years. And now, they wanted to be seen as victims of circumstance. "What can we do to make sure they face real justice?" I asked. "Testify," Albert said simply. "Your words, combined with the evidence, will help the jury see their true intent. But it will be painful," he warned. "Facing your son in court, hearing excuses for what he did, will take everything you have left." He was right. The thought of meeting Lucas's eyes again, of hearing his defense built on lies, filled me with dread. Still, I knew what had to be done for Andrew, for ourselves, and for the children who deserved the truth about their parents. 3 weeks after the arrests, Thomas and I were finally discharged from the hospital. We were still healing. He leaned on crutches, and I wore my arm in a sling, but we were alive. When we walked into our house, it felt different. Hollow, as if a play had ended and all the actors had gone home. Everything was just as we had left it that morning of the so-called family trip. The breakfast dishes were still piled in the sink. The bed remained unmade. The flowers Lucas had brought that week sat on the kitchen table, wilted and dry. It felt as though time itself had stopped the moment our ordinary lives had ended. That night, as Thomas and I lay in our familiar bed, I asked quietly, "Do you think we will ever be happy again?" He wrapped his good arm around me and sighed. "I do not know, Nora," he said softly, "but we are alive, and for the first time in 25 years there are no more secrets between us." 6 months later, the trial began. On the morning I took the stand, I looked at Lucas straight in the eyes for the first time since the arrest. There was no regret, no sorrow, not even a flicker of humanity. The boy I had once raised was gone. In his place sat a cold stranger who had only ever worn my son's face. After recounting every detail of that nightmare, I turned to him and spoke from the witness box. "Lucas, I do not know who you are anymore. The son I loved died the night you killed Andrew. What has lived in his place since then is something I no longer recognize." The jury deliberated for 3 long days before returning with their verdict. Lucas was found guilty of first-degree murder for Andrew's death and first-degree attempted murder for what he did to us. Paige received the same sentence as an accomplice. Both were condemned to life imprisonment without the chance of parole. 1 year has passed since that day. Thomas and I are now in the process of adopting our grandchildren. They are innocent, beautiful children who deserve a future built on real love, not manipulation or deceit. Each night, when I tuck them into bed, I tell them about their Uncle Andrew, the brother they never had the chance to meet. I tell them about his kindness, his honesty, and his dream of living a life guided by integrity and compassion. I want them to grow up knowing that goodness can survive even in the shadow of terrible betrayal.